She hadn't spoken in 4 months until she pointed at the hospital's star surgeon and whispered, "It was your fault." Everyone froze. A mute child. A missing scan. A clock ticking down on a secret buried deep inside St. Augustine Medical Center. What she revealed next would shatter reputations and expose a truth no one wanted told. Want to know what happened? Watch to the end, and don't miss this story full of raw emotion and shocking twists. Tell us your city in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping stories. The waiting room at St. Augustine Medical Center smelled faintly of disinfectant and distant coffee. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the gaps left by conversation, which had long since dried up around Grace Watkins. For 4 months, she hadn't said a word, not a laugh, not a cry, not even a whisper, just a steady, quiet presence, her eyes dark wells of grief no one could reach. She was 9. Too young to grasp malpractice law, too old to forget the way her mother's hand felt, as it slipped from hers in that hallway months ago. December 14th, it lived in her bones now, a night wrapped in sirens and cold rain. Her mother, Clara, had doubled over at the dinner table, clutching her chest and whispering a name, St. Augustine. It was the hospital just 10 blocks away, a place with polished marble floors and a reputation for miracles. She hadn't made it out. Since then, Grace had barely moved except to draw. Her sketchbook followed her everywhere, pages full of shapes no one quite understood, spirals, knives, sunsets with a hole punched through them. Evelyn, her grandmother and now guardian, had tried everything: therapists, journals, music. Grace would listen, but she wouldn't respond. Only one toy ever seemed to matter, a plastic stethoscope, the kind you'd find in a pretend doctor's kit. She wore it under her hoodie like armor. No one knew why. Evelyn understood sorrow in her own way. A former music teacher with hands that still trembled at the piano, she regretted every missed call with Clara, every harsh word exchanged over money or pride. But there was no rewinding time. Only Grace remained, watchful, silent, and drawing. Secrets that seemed to bleed from her heart straight into graphite. That morning, the hospital buzzed with something strange. Posters announced a Healing Hearts weekend, promising open tours, smiles, and a chance to meet the staff behind the scenes. It reeked of a public relations stunt. Evelyn didn't care. She had asked for Clara's medical records 3 separate times and been met with vague delays and legal walls. But the clock was ticking, a Florida statute that gave families just 90 days to formally claim malpractice was already winding down. This event was their last hope of access. Grace didn't speak. She simply nodded when Evelyn asked if she wanted to go. And that's how they ended up in the ICU corridor, face to face with Dr. Nathan Harris, hero surgeon, TV darling, keynote speaker. He walked with a documentary crew, gesturing as he spoke, smiling just enough for the camera. His gaze skimmed over Evelyn, then landed on Grace, and that's when it happened. She stepped forward, lifted her chin, and whispered, "It was your fault." The words were no louder than steam, but they hit like a thunderclap. Dr. Harris froze. His left foot hovered mid-stride, a gesture so awkward and incomplete it betrayed everything he'd trained himself to suppress: hesitation, vulnerability, guilt. The crew's cameras paused, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. No one else had heard her, not clearly, but he had. The voice, quiet as it was, rang louder in his ears than any code blue ever had. Grace stood motionless, her face expressionless, but her eyes locked onto his with a steadiness that stripped away the polish of 10,000 press releases. She clutched her toy stethoscope, the tubing looped like a noose between her fingers, and stared into him with a certainty that unnerved the entire hallway. Harris managed to mutter something about a meeting and excused himself from the crew. As he turned the corner, he stumbled into a supply cart. A clipboard clattered to the ground. He didn't pick it up. In the waiting area, Evelyn reached for Grace's hand. It was colder than usual. What the girl had said, or what she might have said, spread like static among the staff. Someone had heard a child's voice. Someone else had seen a camera's red light flicker, but no one wanted to be the one to bring it up directly. Not with Harris, not after what happened with Clara Watkins. 3 months earlier, Harris had been summoned from a gala hosted in his honor. He remembered the room, lit by golden chandeliers, champagne flutes catching light, like halos. His speech had been slated for 9:30. Instead, he was paged at 9:04. A middle-aged woman, abdominal pain, suspected dissection. He'd barely reviewed her chart. No one questioned him when he bypassed the scan. His initials carried weight, and 26 minutes later, Clara's heart had ruptured. Now, her daughter had spoken. And not just spoken, but accused. The implications were too vast to untangle in that moment, but Harris felt it crack open something inside him, a place he had bricked over years ago, the space where doubt used to live. Downstairs, Evelyn asked the front desk for a printed schedule of the day's events. Her voice was sharp, her back ramrod straight. "We'd like to see OR2, she said. The receptionist hesitated. "That's only on the physician tier of the tour, ma'am." "I understand," Evelyn replied, "but my granddaughter has something she wants to show the doctor." Grace nodded. Then she slipped the sketchbook from her backpack and opened to a page filled with sharp angles and a shape like a clock. Its hands snapped clean off. A volunteer named Caleb tried gently to redirect them. "Only pre-registered families on the heart donor circle have clearance for that floor," he said, his tone rehearsed but kind. Evelyn didn't blink. She leaned slightly forward, just enough to suggest that formality would not stop her now. "We're not here for the muffins and balloon arches," she said. "This girl lost her mother here. That room matters." Caleb hesitated. Behind him, another family posed for a photo in front of a glittery Healing Lives banner. He looked at Grace. How still she was. How she clutched that sketchbook like it might vanish if he looked away. Then he sighed. "Follow me." The elevator was silent except for its steady upward hum. On the 12th floor, fluorescent light gave way to a soft, sterile glow. Cooler, almost surgical. OR2's viewing gallery was cordoned off with velvet. Rope, like an exhibit in a museum. Grace stepped toward it slowly. Through the glass, she saw the room. It had been scrubbed clean, reset to perfection. No sign of her mother's last moments. No music. No blood. Just instruments lined in metallic. Rows, like soldiers waiting for orders. She turned the page of her sketchbook. This time it was unmistakable. A hallway clock showing 9:31. A tiny figure in scrubs walking away from an operating table. Jazz notes drifting from his pocket like smoke. The caption beneath, in shaky handwriting, "He left too early." Evelyn stared at it, then looked through. The glass again. Something in her gut twisted. Back in the administrative lounge, Dr. Harris stared into a cup of untouched coffee. His phone buzzed. A text from his son, Leo. "Games tonight, don't bail." He closed the message without replying. For a moment, he almost let himself believe the whisper hadn't happened, that the child had imagined him, but she hadn't. He knew her eyes. He stood and headed toward records. Meanwhile, Grace snapped a photo through the gallery glass, the camera flash muted by a taped filter. She captured the clock, still there above the exit. Same time, 9:31. Evelyn placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "That's enough," she said softly, but Grace didn't move. She turned one more page. This one showed a figure, no face, blocking. A bright sun, casting the whole hospital into shadow. That's when the sketchbook slipped from her hands. Dozens of pages scattered like feathers across the floor. Guests turned, staff paused, and as Grace knelt to gather the pages, she whispered one more sentence, this time loud enough for the room to hear. You knew she needed more time. Somewhere. Down the West Wing hallway, applause erupted from the Healing Hearts auditorium. A donor had just pledged another 7-figure gift. Cameras panned to grateful families and smiling nurses. But back on the 12th floor, the air felt different, tense, suspended. Evelyn stooped beside Grace, helping her gather the scattered drawings. Her fingers trembled, not from age, but from recognition. Each page seemed more precise than the last. Surgeon's gloves stained blue, a scalpel balanced on a clock face, hospital doors swinging like gallows. These weren't just the wild imaginings of a grieving child, they were memories. Frozen moments transcribed in crayon and graphite. No, one tried to stop them when they returned to the lobby. Evelyn walked with a kind of practiced resolve, the way one might approach a final recital, composed on the outside, but bracing for impact. She didn't ask for permission as she led Grace toward the administrative wing, past HR, past billing, past the executive offices where photos of Dr. Harris smiled from polished frames. They stopped at the medical archive room. The lock blinked green. Inside, the scent of old toner and dry paper coated the air. Fluorescent panels buzzed overhead, uneven in their flicker. Rows of file cabinets lined the walls, some tagged with masking tape, others with embossed brass. Evelyn didn't know what she was looking for, but her body did. It moved on instinct, fueled by memory and regret. Drawer 17. File W. Clara Watkins. She opened it. First came the intake form, then the vitals, then the surgical notes. Some typed, others handwritten, initials barely legible. And then nothing. No consent form, no CTA scan order, just a notation, proceed stat, initialed NH. It was a signature Evelyn remembered from the sympathy card the hospital had mailed 2 days after the funeral. A sharp click behind them broke the silence. Angela Cho, an ICU nurse with tired eyes and a badge that said 10 years of excellence, stepped into the room. She didn't look surprised. I thought someone might come for it, she said. I kept a copy. From her satchel, she pulled a yellowed folder, slightly creased at the corners. Inside was everything the official file lacked: CTA requisition form, unsigned consent notice, time-stamped nurse's log. I made copies the night Clara died, Angela added, in case someone tried to erase what really happened. She placed the folder on the desk and looked at Evelyn. You can take this to a lawyer or to the press, but either way, it's time. Grace didn't say a word. She just reached into her hoodie, unscrewed the toy stethoscope's hollow chest piece, and slipped the photocopied page inside like a secret returning home. By the time they exited, the hospital evening light had softened the building's sharp edges, but inside Evelyn, something had sharpened. No longer just a grandmother mourning, she was now a woman with proof, a timeline, and 4 days left on Florida's 90-day statute. Clock. Every second mattered. At home, she spread the documents across the dining table like a conductor preparing a final score. Her late husband's silver trumpet, recently pawned to keep the electricity on, had been quietly redeemed using her savings. It sat nearby, a symbol of unfinished songs and promises she intended to keep. Grace sat across from her, sketchbook closed for once. Her eyes remained fixed on the toy stethoscope, now a vessel of truth. Evelyn didn't ask her to speak. She didn't need to. She picked up the phone and called a law office whose ad she'd circled in the paper weeks earlier but never dared dial. The receptionist transferred her quickly when she mentioned the words medical error and child. Witness. An hour later, she met attorney David Linton over video call. He listened, really listened, without interrupting. When she showed him the photocopies Nurse Cho had saved, his expression changed. This isn't just malpractice, he said. It's willful negligence. You might have a criminal case. He asked for the full medical timeline. Evelyn provided what she'd pieced together from the hospital's evasive letters, Grace's drawings, and her own memory. Then she mentioned Angela Cho's name, and Linton nodded. She's listed on the shift log, he said. That makes her a corroborating witness. Within 24 hours, a formal pre-suit notice had been filed. Linton attached a sworn affidavit from a vascular surgeon confirming that skipping the CTA scan violated the standard of care. He also forwarded a separate motion to the State Medical Board, alongside a request for Dr. Harris's suspension pending investigation. Didn't take long for the story to catch fire. Small local outlet ran a headline, "Mute child accuses surgeon, grandmother files suit." But what ignited public interest wasn't the legal filing, it was Grace's drawings. Online users began decoding them. The blue dripping scalpel, the sun, blocked by shadow. The hallway clock with no hands. Reddit threads unraveled it like a mystery novel. Twitter hashtags multiplied. Silent truth. See Clara deserved time. See Grace spoke. Suddenly, Harris wasn't just a doctor. He was the face of a system too big to question. Until a little girl dared to whisper back. Public attention surged like a tide, and St. Augustine's press office scrambled to contain the fallout. Official statements framed the incident as a complex and evolving matter. Behind the scenes, legal teams began crafting a defense that leaned heavily on a familiar playbook: ambiguity, redirection, and the subtle erosion of memory. They painted Clara as a hesitant patient, someone who delayed care. They argued that Grace's drawings were open to interpretation, a child's art, not evidence. But Evelyn, resolute as stone, kept pushing forward. With 3 days left on the statute clock, something unexpected arrived by mail. The envelope was small and creased at the corners, postmarked 3 months prior, but delayed by a forwarding error. The handwriting was unmistakable, Clara's, slanted and warm, like a voice reaching through time. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table as sunlight washed over the wood grain. She hesitated before opening it, unsure whether the truth inside would soothe or sear. The letter was dated the day before the surgery. It began simply, "Mum, if you're reading this, something went wrong." Clara had written about their last argument, how she'd asked for help, how Evelyn had said no out of pride or fear, or maybe both. But what followed wasn't blame. It was forgiveness and a request. "If anything happens to me, please play my song for Grace. She'll know what it means. She'll know I didn't leave without loving her more than my own life." Folded inside was a sheet of music, a few bars scribbled in pencil. Not a full composition, just a melody Clara had hummed since Grace was little, their bedtime ritual. A song without words, but with meaning Grace had always understood. Evelyn pressed her palm over her heart. She didn't know when she'd share it, not yet, but she would. Meanwhile, Dr. Harris unraveled in silence. He avoided the press, refused. Interviews, even left the hospital mid-shift one afternoon. No one knew where he went, not even his son. Leo, just 16, had been texting him more frequently. Short messages, mostly questions. "You okay? Game's tomorrow. You coming?" Then came the moment that changed everything. During the second quarter of Leo's playoff game, he collapsed. Chest pain, shallow breaths, sudden panic. At the ER, a junior surgeon named Dr. Priya Patel ordered a cardiac CTA without hesitation. The scan showed a congenital coarctation, a narrowing that, if missed, could have been deadly. They caught it early, standing. Outside the surgical room, Harris stared at his son, helpless. In that moment, all his defenses crumbled. He finally understood what Clara must have felt, what she was denied. Sleep didn't come for Harris that night. He sat beside Leo's hospital bed, watching the rise and fall of his son's chest under pale blue blankets. Every beep of the heart monitor felt like a sentence from a language he had once mastered and now barely understood. The irony wasn't lost on him. His son's life preserved by the very protocol he had once skipped. At dawn, he made the call. Evelyn answered on the second ring, expecting a reporter or lawyer. Instead, she heard a voice she hadn't heard since. "Clara's death. I have the originals," Harris said. "All of them. The consent form, the cancelled scan request, the nurse's note, my initials. I'll testify." Silence stretched. "I can't undo what I did," he added, "but the lie ends here." Evelyn didn't thank him. She didn't have to. The relief in her exhale said enough. The hearing began just before noon on the statute's final day. Crowds formed outside the courthouse, reporters jostling for position. Hashtags trended. Supporters brought signs with Grace's drawings printed across them, symbols now seen not as art, but as testimony. Inside, Judge Marisol Ramirez presided, a sharp-eyed woman who had once lost her husband to a post-op error no one claimed. She knew exactly what silence could hide. The courtroom agreed to special accommodations for Grace. She could communicate however she wished. Before the proceedings began, Evelyn reached into her bag and unfolded Clara's letter. She read it softly in the side room, her voice breaking just once. Grace listened, eyes shut, her fingers resting over the toy stethoscope still tucked beneath her sweater. When it came time to speak, Grace walked to the witness box, sketchbook in hand. She didn't say a word, at least not at first. She opened to a blank page and began to draw, a heart split by a jagged seam, one half blue, danger, the other yellow, hope. Then, from the hollow chamber of the stethoscope, she pulled a folded paper, the missing page from Clara's file. The CTA order, unsigned. She taped it across the heart like a bandage. The room exhaled as one. Judge Ramirez leaned forward. "Would you like to speak?" Grace met Harris's eyes. His pager buzzed. Habit made him flinch, but he didn't look. "Away, I'm listening," he said. Grace's voice came at last, quiet but unshaken. "Play Mom's song." Evelyn stood. Hands trembling, she raised the old silver trumpet and played a broken, aching melody. The courtroom went still. Then Grace whispered, "Now tell her what you didn't tell her," and the doctor confessed. Every word from Dr. Harris landed like a stone in water, ripples moving through the courtroom, through the gallery, through the silence that had shaped Grace's life since December. He spoke without defense. No scripts, no legal filters, just the truth, raw and late. He recounted the gala, the board members' urgency, the skipped scan, his son's text. The gamble, he told himself, was justified until it wasn't. "I rushed because I believed I had enough time," he said. "But time is measured in heartbeats, and I stole hers." No one moved. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers hovering. Above the keys, Evelyn gripped the edge of the bench. Grace never took her eyes off him. 3 more families stepped forward that same afternoon, each one carrying stories of surgeries gone sideways, of decisions made behind closed doors. Suddenly the case wasn't about one mother and one doctor. It was about a system built on silence. The court revoked Harris's medical license for 5 years. He was sentenced to 5,000 hours at Mercy Street Free Clinic, a community-run medical center in the city's neglected quarter. His malpractice payout, redirected by civil settlement, seeded the Clara Watkins Foundation for free diagnostic imaging in underserved communities. The hospital board chair resigned, now under investigation for obstruction. Evelyn never smiled. During the press conferences, never basked in the moment, but she stood tall. During a deposition, one of the hospital's attorneys asked Harris when he knew he was out of time. He answered without blinking, when her daughter stopped counting. 6 months later, Mercy Street buzzed with a kind of energy it hadn't felt in years. The space, once dim and forgotten, had been transformed. Warm LED lights replaced the buzzing fluorescence. Murals of sunrise clocks adorned the walls. Harris moved through the clinic differently now. Hair grayer, voice quieter, but his hands were steady again. That morning he reviewed a scan for a single father, diagnosing a dangerous early-stage aneurysm, saved by the very foundation born of Clara's story. Outside, a volunteer tapped him on the shoulder. "News crews want to talk to you," she said. He shook his head. "Let the patient speak." From the doorway, Grace entered with Evelyn beside her. She walked straight to a bulletin board, where her drawing hung laminated above a headline, "Hospital reopens 18, negligence cases after viral trial." She handed him a wooden box. Inside, Clara's old wristwatch, repaired, ticking, the face engraved. To Grace, time begins again. She lifted the trumpet, played 2 clear notes, then looked at Evelyn. "Mom's song is back," she said, and together they walked into the light.